Hi everyone. Today's video I'm going to read Genesis chapter 41, and this chapter have 57 verses. And this chapter is all about the promotion of Joseph. In the previous chapter, chapter 40, Joseph was forgotten. Joseph was forgotten by the cupbearer after um, the fulfillment of the dream. Joseph interpreted their dreams, both of them with the chief baker and the cupbearer. And Joseph told to the cupbearer that when all goes well with you, mention me to Pharaoh and get me out of this prison. But after the dream was fulfilled and he was restored to his position, he forget about Joseph. But this time in this chapter, he remembered Joseph. And so I'm going to read Genesis chapter 41. It says here, when 2 full years had passed, Pharaoh had a dream. He was standing by the Nile when out of the river there came up 7 cows, sleek and fat, 7 fat cow, and they grazed among the reeds. After them 7 other cows, ugly and gaunt. Gaunt is very skinny, bony, haggard, came up out of the Nile and stood beside those on the river bank. And the cows that were ugly and gaunt ate up the 7 sleek fat cow. Then Pharaoh woke up. So this is the first dream of Pharaoh. The second one is in here in verse 5. He fell asleep again and had a second dream. 7 heads of grain, healthy and good, were growing on a single stalk. So there is a grain, one single stalk of grain. A single stalk of grain have 7 heads of healthy and good. No? The 7 heads of the grains were healthy and good. After them 7 other heads of grain sprout, thin and scorched by the east wind. The thin heads of grain swallowed up the 7 healthy full head. Then Pharaoh woke up. It had been a dream. So this is the dream of Pharaoh. In verse 8, in the morning his mind was troubled. So he sent for all the magicians and wise men of Egypt. Pharaoh told them his dream, but no one could interpret for them. Then the chief cupbearer said to Pharaoh, today I am reminded of my shortcoming. Pharaoh was once angry with his servants, and he imprisoned me and the chief cupbaker, in the house of the captain of the guard. Each of us had a dream the same night, and each dream had a meaning of its own. Now a young Hebrew was there with us, a servant of the captain of the guard. He told him our dreams, and he interpreted them for us, giving each man the interpretation of his dream. And the things turned out exactly as he interpreted them to us. I was restored to my position, and the other man was hung. So Pharaoh sent for Joseph, and he was quickly brought from the dungeon. When he had shaved and changed his clothes, he came before Pharaoh. Pharaoh said to Joseph, I had a dream, and no one can interpret it, but I have heard it said of you that when you hear a dream, you can interpret it. I cannot do it, Joseph replied to Pharaoh, but God will give Pharaoh the answer he desired. So, Pharaoh remember Joseph. Uh, and he mentioned him to Pharaoh this time. Pharaoh, after the dream of Pharaoh, he was troubled man. He was in trouble. And so he sought for the interpretation. He's looking for someone to interpret his dream. And so this time, the cupbearer remembered Joseph. So in verse 17, it says here, in verse 17, sorry. Then Pharaoh said to Joseph, in my dream I was standing on the bank of the Nile. Now Pharaoh is telling his dream to Joseph. Then Pharaoh said to Joseph, in my dream I was standing on the Nile, on the bank of the Nile. Then out of the river there came up 7 cows, fat and sleek, and they grazed among the reeds. After them 7 other cows came up, scrawny and very ugly and lean. I had never seen such ugly cows in all the land of Egypt. The lean, ugly cow ate up the 7 fat cows that came up first. But even after they ate them, no one could tell they have done so. They looked just as ugly as before. Then I woke up. In my dream, I also saw 7 heads of grain, full and good, growing in a single stalk. After them 7 other heads sprouted, withered and thin, and scorched by the east wind. The thin heads of grain swallowed up the 7 good heads. I told this to the magician, but none could explain it to me. So, there are magicians in his palace, his kingdom. They're the one serving also with the king, with the Pharaoh. But no one with this magician, no one can interpret the dream. Then Joseph said to Pharaoh, the dream of Pharaoh are one and the same. God has revealed to Pharaoh what he is about to do. The 7 good cows are 7 years, and the 7 good heads of grain and 7 years. It is one and the same dream. The 7 lean, ugly cows that came up after the 7 years. The 7 good cows are 7 years, and the 7 good heads of grains are 7 years. It is one and the same dream. The 7 lean, ugly cow that came up after the 7 years, and are so the 7 worthless head of grain scorched by the wind. They are 7 years of famine. It is just as I said to Pharaoh. God has shown Pharaoh what he is about to do. 7 years of great abundance are coming throughout the land of Egypt, but 7 years of famine will follow them. Then all the abundance in Egypt will be forgotten, and the famine will ravage the land. The abundance in the land will not be remembered, because the famine that follows it will be so severe. The reason the dream was given to Pharaoh in two forms is that the matter has been firmly decided by God, and God will do it soon. And now let Pharaoh look for a discerning and wise man, and put him in charge of the land of Egypt. Let Pharaoh appoint commissioner over the land to take a fifth of the harvest of Egypt during the 7 years of abundance. They should collect all the foods of those good years that are coming and store up the grain under the authority of Pharaoh to be kept in the cities for food. This food should be held in reserve for the country to be used during the years of famine that will come upon Egypt, so that the country may not be ruined by the famine. So this is the Joseph interpret the dreams, and he advised by the wisdom of God he advised Pharaoh what he should do. God had showed it to Pharaoh. The dream, God spoke to Pharaoh through the dream to guide him on what he should do. And God guide Pharaoh in what he should do through Joseph. God used Joseph to guide Pharaoh, the king of Egypt at the time. This is what happened in Egypt before. It's a history. It happened before, in the time of Joseph. There is that 7 years of plenty, of abundance, but it was not remembered as what it says here, because of the 7 years of famine that follows. It's so severe that all the prosperity in that land they cannot remember it, because the 7 years of famine is so severe. And so the advice of Joseph is, he advised the king on what he should do. And in verse 30, 37, it says here, now, the plan seems good to Pharaoh and all his officials. So Pharaoh asked them, "Can we find anyone like this man? One in whom is the Spirit of God." So they recognize that God is with Joseph. Even also with Potiphar, he see that God is with Joseph. Then Pharaoh said to Joseph, "Since God has made all this known to you, there is no one so discerning and wise as you. You shall be in charge of my palace, and all my people are to submit to your orders. Only with respect to the throne will I be greater than you." So this is what Pharaoh said. He said, "You shall be in charge of my palace, and all my people are to submit to your orders. Only with respect to the throne will I be greater than you." So here, Joseph was promoted. Joseph become a ruler, the governor. Second, he is, pero he said, just only with respect to the throne will I be greater than you. So he is second in rank with Pharaoh. If today he is the vice president, if in uh, in in our time, there are the president, vice president, from prison to mission, to a ruler, to a governor. So God, in this chapter, God exalted Joseph, was promoted. But even when Joseph was, even when Potiphar bought Joseph to the Midianites or to the Midianites, Ismailites, same. He was in charge also of the household of Potiphar, because Potiphar saw that God is with Joseph, and everything Joseph do is uh, it was blessed by God and it was successful. He is success he is prospering. He prospered the household of Potiphar because of Joseph. And even when he was in prison, he was falsely accused and he was in prison. And the warden in that prison. So again, God is so gracious to Joseph again, even when he was in prison, and that the warden saw uh, he again entrusted Joseph. He gave he let Joseph in charge also with the prisoner there. That's why he was with those two big with the prisoners of the king, because God is so kind to Joseph. God is with Joseph even when he's in prison, and the, the, that he found favor in the eyes of the warden there. And so he was in charge in all this, everywhere, the household of Potiphar, and even in prison. And now is the whole Egypt. Huh? Like he's just slaves and become the president and become the governor. It's like in a company or in just the boss were once a janitor. Something like that. Yeah, but even in real life, there are people who also experience that kind of promotion. So in verse 41, I will continue. So Joseph is in charge of Egypt. So Pharaoh said to Joseph, I hereby put you in charge of the whole land of Egypt. Then Pharaoh took his signet ring from his finger and put it on Joseph's finger. It's the ring of authority. And put it in Joseph's finger. He dressed him in a robe of fine linen and put a gold chain around his neck. See? He put his robe. See here, the Pharaoh took his signet ring and put him on Joseph's finger. He dressed him in a robes of fine linen and put a gold chain around his neck. Now when he was promoted, when he was still in his father's house, his robe, the brother, after they sold him to the Ismailite, they get his robe. that his father made it for him. They get Joseph robe and he slaughter an animal and they dip it into the blood, and then they give it to their father to cover up their sin. Hmm? And they say, examine this, if this is the robes of your son. Hmm? And when their father saw it, oh, he said that Joseph was killed, torn to pieces by the wild animals. And so his father thought that he was dead. And when he was in Potiphar's house, the wife of Potiphar took notice of him, as was said in 37. Yes, in chapter 37. He took notice of him. Because it says here that Joseph was handsome. I don't know how old Joseph when he took notice of him, because he was only 17 when they sold him to Egypt. And sometime later it says there Potiphar's wife took notice of him. But after he was sold but he was only 17 when he was sold in Egypt, and he served Potiphar's from household, and until he was in prison 2 years after that. It says that 2 full years. No, it says here that 2 full years have passed. No, after he interpreted the dream of the servant of the king. So it's 13 years old. 13 years. But for sure, Joseph was in prison for 2 years. Uh, it was not mentioned there how long he served in Potiphar's house before Potiphar's wife took notice of him. So maybe if he is only in prison for 2 years, then he served Potiphar's house 11 years. Because in here it says that Joseph was 30 years old when he entered the service of King of Egypt. So yes, I'm talking about here now because he was dressed in a robe of fine linen, and I'm telling that here in his father's household he used his robe, and here in Potiphar's house his wife caught his robe, also his cloth, the cloak of Joseph. When he tempted Joseph, the suffering of Joseph also here. So he caught when he talked to Joseph to bed with her, and then he get the cloak of Joseph, and then he says that Joseph, and then he blamed Joseph. He falsely accused Joseph that Joseph want to rape her. And so Potiphar was so angry and he imprisoned Joseph. So he accused Joseph of sin, using his robe, the cloak of Joseph. Oh, he says that he screamed and Joseph leave his cloak and he ran out. But Joseph ran away from the temptation. And so here, with all those, I observed that he used the clock. He was used those that when he suffered, but now when God promoted him, he dressed him up with fine and linen, and put a gold chain around his neck. He had him ride in a chariot as a second in command. And men shouted before him, "Make way!" Thus he put him in charge of the whole land of Egypt. Then Pharaoh said to Joseph, I am Pharaoh Pharaoh, but without your word, no one will lift hand or foot in all Egypt. So this is what Pharaoh told to Joseph. So he is the one in charge of everything. He gave the authority to Joseph. In verse 46, it says, in 34, it says, Then Pharaoh said to Joseph, I am Pharaoh, but without your word, like he become his mouthpiece. No one will lift hand or foot in all Egypt. Pharaoh gave Joseph the name Zaphenath Paneah and gave him Asenath, daughter of Potiphera, priest of On, to be his wife. And Joseph went throughout the land of Egypt. Joseph was 30 years old when he entered the service of Pharaoh, king of Egypt, and Joseph went out from Pharaoh's presence and traveled throughout Egypt. So Joseph was given a wife. Pharaoh gave him a wife. During the 7 years of abundance, the land produced plentifully. 7 years. Joseph collected all the food produced in those 7 years of abundance in Egypt and stored it in the cities. In each city, he put the food grown in the field surrounding it. Joseph stored up huge quantities of grain like the sand of the sea. It was so much that he stopped keeping record because it was beyond measure. Oh, they keep record, but he stopped it. It's beyond measure, it says here. They stopped recording where all the grains that they piled up, stored up for the whole land. They're storing up food for preparing for the coming famine. Before the years of famine came, 2 sons were born to Joseph by Asenath, daughter of Potiphera, priest of On. So Joseph have family. Joseph named his firstborn Manasseh. Manasseh, and said, It is because God has made me forget all my troubles and all my father's household. So he gave the name Manasseh, meaning he forgets. Wow. It is because God has made me forget. So God has made me forget. So God helped Joseph to forget all his troubles in his father's household. He forget. I need to say he forget what his brothers had done to him. I mean, it's when he forgive them. Wow. The second son he named Ephraim and said, It is because God has made me fruitful in the land of my suffering. So God made him fruitful in the land of his suffering. Manasseh. So Ephraim means fruitful. Not Manasseh means to forget, but Ephraim means fruitful. Fruitful. Wow. Yes, God made him fruitful in the land of his suffering. He suffered in prison and all his suffering there, but God promote him, give him a family, and have children, and God, he become fruitful, prosperous. Wow. In verse 53, it says here, the 7 years of abundance in Egypt came to an end, and the 7 years of famine began, just as Joseph had said. There was famine in all other lands, in all the other lands, but in the whole land of Egypt there was food. When all Egypt began to feel the famine, the people cried out to Pharaoh for food. Then Pharaoh told all the Egyptians, "Go to Joseph and do what he tells you." When the famine had spread over the whole country, Joseph opened the storehouses, sold grain to the Egyptians, for the famine was severe throughout Egypt. And all the countries came to buy grain from Joseph because the famine was severe in all the world. Wow. Wow, Joseph has all this authority in Egypt. Wow, God promoted Joseph after all his suffering, but it was God used Joseph to save all these people from this famine. So this is the story of Joseph. It's so interesting, and even in this chapter, was what he says that he forget all his trouble. God made me forget all my trouble in my father's household. Wow, it says God made me. So it is God who helped him. So even in all this, he also we can see his faith to the Lord, even all the suffering that he went through. He did not. There is no record of even when there he did not say he blamed God or whatever. But we can see that he is a faithful to God. He trusts God and is a God-fearing man. So God is always with Joseph. Hallelujah. So it's so wonderful reading this chapter. It was very nice. It motivates us, and with all the trouble, in the case of Joseph, he promoted him. But even God can also do it in our lives, depend on what our trouble is, that we are suffering. We always remember that after the trouble, there is always the blessing. God will always lift us up. Now it's what kind of problem or trouble we have in life, we are facing in life. We might not be like Joseph, that he is he become a governor, but in a way that God has planned in our lives. Small thing or great things, God is fulfilling. God will fulfill His plan in our lives as long as we continue, as long as we become faithful. No? We can see that Joseph is faithful. He did not lose his faith even after all the suffering he went through in life. Hallelujah. And I hope that this word of God that I've read has blessed you. If you are listening to this Bible reading, may God bless you. Thank you and see you again on the next reading, chapter 42. God bless you. God bless you all.